Oh, what do I want to learn about on the internet today? The U of A has some open mind stocks. Let's look at those. What the fuck is that?
It's a long colonial tradition that Indigenous peoples are on the receiving end of the scientific gaze.
Isn't that a little homophobic of you to say that scientific gaze? Oh, wait, you meant, like looking, okay. Ooh.
I study and promote Indigenous resistance to colonial science and Indigenous efforts to transform and govern science and technology.
This could be very commendable of you, but I see it going in a very wrong direction.
It's commonly thought that racial science ended a long time ago.
Well, nobody does support it anymore, at least.
We hear it mischaracterized as pseudoscience.
Well, yes, I would absolutely call measuring skull or nose size for intelligence pseudoscience.
But distinguished scientists practiced then cutting-edge science.
Well, people used to believe that alchemy was a science that you could turn lead into gold. For fuck's sakes.
Nazi Germany took foundational lessons from the US and Britain.
Well, yes, they took the ass-backwards science that they had made and only cherry-picked that for their research.
Here you see it in a textbook, The Hierarchy of Man, with the Greek skull at the pinnacle. Viewed as less evolved, the Negro sits just above the ape.
Name me one instance since the new millennium that this type of research has been performed.
Other 19th century illustrations show the American Indian below the Greek. Fast forward to 1939. A German scientist measures a Tibetan woman's cranium. He advised Nazi doctors later on race science.
I have a feeling you're about to compare him to the everyday scientist. What is wrong with you?
In the mid-20th century, experiments were conducted on First Nations people in Manitoba and in 6 residential schools across Canada. Indigenous people, some of them almost starved, were used as a living laboratory for nutrition scientists to pursue research questions about which they were curious.
Yeah, this is fucked up. But are you going to compare it to modern science? Yes, you are. And that is where you're wrong.
Number 1, was the shiftless, indolent, inert Indian really simply a malnourished subject? Number 2, were foods supplied by traders after Indians were removed from their land inadequate in light of modern nutritional knowledge?
God damn, that horse is pretty high you're riding. Don't fall off now.
In the 1990s, the Havasupai who live in the Grand Canyon gave blood to Arizona State University for diabetes research. They later learned that samples and data were also used for human migrations research, which they do not support, and they learned that their data informed a schizophrenia grant, which they forbade. The principal investigator still defends her rights to their DNA. It doesn't have to be that way.
Hey, there are things against that in the scientific community. That person acted against the rules of the scientific community. That is not the norm, you idiot. Also, they didn't do this because the population was native. They did this because they just happened to be a group that they needed data from. Is it wrong? Yes. Is it relevant to your argument? Absolutely fucking not.
Here you see the Pinoleville Pomo Nation in California and Berkeley architecture and engineering faculty and students collaborating to build green housing. Tribal youth, elders, elected leaders, and planners worked with professors and students in a co-design process that combined cultural and environmental sustainability.
You know what? That kind of culture can actually stay. It's not trying to rape or murder us, so I'm okay with it.
Cultural and technical knowledges were valued. Collaborators learned that both Indigenous people and scientists bring cultural ideas to define sustainability.
Well, the scientists do bring their own cultural ideas about sustainability, but that's on cultural sustainability, not on resource sustainability. Very different things.
The Berkeley crowd brought secular and urban-centric ideas, while Pomo tend to have bigger families or more rural, and they wanted east-facing windows for morning prayers.
So they taught the students to find out the needs of their clients, Well, that's fantastic. That's what any design firm would do in any situation. That has nothing to do with cultural science or cultural ideas in science.
Both parties also learned that they each bring technical know-how, for example, related to building materials.
Well, yes, the natives of an area will have passed down things that work because that's what helps them survive. So yes, they will have some ideas on building materials, but they may not know why they work well.
Students earned degrees, published papers with faculty. The tribe got beautifully designed sustainable housing and developed green building codes.
Great, but I'm not exactly sure where this is relevant to your point at all, where you need to decolonize science. It's just a strange anecdote that's kind of positive.
Having regular contact with diverse students, children in the community set their sights on perhaps attending Berkeley. They might even become engineers.
And all the power to them. I wish for nothing but for people to achieve what they want in their dreams. That's perfectly fine with me.
It's a chicken and egg problem that diversity in science generates more diversity. Diverse identities bring diverse values and experiences, but a word of caution. Whatever one's personal identification, training as a scientist, big S, involves indoctrination into the privileges conferred by the symbolic white
Washing of other cultures. Yeah, I know that's what you want to say. Well, it's not true. Science doesn't take culture into perspective because it is not relevant to science.
lab coat.
Could you try and signal a little more there? Lab coat. Bullshit.
For centuries, scientific institutions have considered diverse bodies and cultures deviant.
For centuries, science was told to say that God did it. That doesn't mean that now it still happens.
Western-defined truth has been seen as existing in opposition to non-Western backwardness.
So essentially, throw empiricism out the window where it doesn't match your religious and cultural beliefs. Perfect.
I've learned that there are two ways to diminish colonialism in science. The first involves collaborative research. The second is to train diverse scientists in a way that takes a decolonial approach.
Decolonial approach? You sound like that idiot from South Africa. For fuck's sakes. Has it gotten this bad?
Indigenous scientists and their cultural advisors might ask different questions. They might invent culturally sensitive lab protocols.
I understand the different viewpoints part, but culturally sensitive lab protocols? Like, I don't believe in bacteria, so therefore we can't use them in any lab study. This is just ridiculous.
These possibilities are highlighted at the Summer Internship for Indigenous Peoples in Genomics, SING, founded in 2010 in the US, which expanded to New Zealand in 2016. With collaborators here at the U of A and at Simon Fraser, I am planning SING programs that will focus on salmon genomics and other Indigenous traditional food sources.
I'm not really sure how you could culturally change how genomics works. That is just mind-blowing to me, how you need cultural lab protocols for genomics. What?
Finally, Indigenous peoples govern through science. Here, the Amamutsun Band in California does collaborative landscape and fire management with the California Department of Environmental Quality and with non-Indigenous landowners. Settler wildlife suppression has been devastating. Local and Indigenous knowledges are drawn upon to change that.
You're not implying that the people who don't have the knowledge to do something don't have the knowledge. You're saying because they're settlers, they don't have the knowledge, or that they're bad, which is not correct.
The National Centre for Indigenous Genomics in Australia brings Indigenous community members and researchers into a national conversation about how to do genomics differently, with Indigenous priorities centered.
I see, so you want to bias towards the natives in some way. That's all this sounds like. It doesn't sound like you want unbiased information.
You also see here a less ideal example of governance through science. Indigenous peoples in the US and Canada use DNA tests in membership, but DNA testing companies tend to be uninformed about Indigenous politics and population movements post-colonization.
If you think that those companies are 100% accurate and you're anyone, that is just dumb. Why are you using this as an argument? It's just a weird, false thing to use. It's like saying my gift shop Eiffel Tower isn't perfectly to scale. Why? Why are you even trying to compare those two things?
Indigenous peoples need scientists that understand not only science, but also social contexts.
Well, yes, I do agree with this to a certain extent. You do need social context in why people are doing things. If it's just a tradition carried from way back, it could have been helpful at one point, but now it's just tradition and meaningless to their behavior.
Only then can Indigenous peoples effectively govern science and govern effectively through science. Thank you.
You know what? I do think everyone should be more educated about science, and then they could make better decisions for everyone. If you look at some of the reservations here in Canada, well, that's not really according to science, that's more according to greed, but it's a very different issue. Trying to say that they need to govern through science is a good thing, but they don't need to be a large influence on science either, unless they want to participate in the empirical method, which is what science is built on. Like, subscribe, maybe comment down below about what you think about how culture influences science and whether that is a good or a bad thing. Have a good day. I'm the Rogue Thread.